Hello there. Welcome to the 9.8 video series from Havenfall Comics. I am Mr. Pickles. As mentioned during my first video, this entire series is devoted to helping buyers and sellers of back-issued key and vintage comics make better decisions out there in the marketplace, whether it's buying or selling. And so the focus of this video is going to be on X-Men titles using one particular recent transaction as a really good indicator and proxy about how far we've come and where we're going. So without further ado, let me give you some background on this particular book. So the most popular, most famous online auction site, which I don't need to mention the name to because they have enough marketing and promotion behind them without me helping them out with my small subscriber base. They had an auction for X-Men number 4, in an 8.5, in a CGC 8.5. This is a book from 1963. It's a very key X-Men title, a multi-appear, as I like to call it, with the first appearance of Scarlet Witch, Quicksilver, Toad, the entire first Brotherhood of Evil Mutants under Magneto. And so this is a big-time book. This is a very important title in the entire X-Men ethos and a very rare book. It's very old. So anyway, to find it at a high grade, I haven't really seen one at a grade this high in quite some time. I was very interested to see where its price moved, or where its price is, where it would finally price out in terms of the end of the auction. So to save you the suspense, this particular book sold at a final price last night of $5,600, $5,600. That sounds all well and good and pretty big deal for a comic book, but if you look at it from a historical context of this book, we're still seeing a slide in the price of this book, and I would argue in the price of all X-Men books. So let's get into the data that I threw together from 2005. So from 2005 all the way through 2019, we realized with this book at this grade a long-term growth rate of a long-term year-over-year average growth rate of about 18%. So if you bought it one year, on average the next year you'd be able to sell it at an 18% gain. It was very consistent. There were only, I think, 2 years where this book had any sizable decline. And so it was a very consistent book. Not quite as compelling as the growth rate of Giant Size X-Men number 1 from my first video, but obviously a very old and valuable key for the X-Men franchise. So, and then of course, as you can see from the chart that my team is going to go ahead and put over my right shoulder, the orange line that you see spike up when we hit 2020 through 2022 is during the pandemic. So we saw comic book collectible prices and things on Amazon, things were flying off the online shelves. Everything went beyond its growth rate. That includes comic books, which you'll see from my chart above. And then from 2022 to 2023, you see significant declines, books coming back to earth in terms of their actual selling prices, which we get, as you can see in the red X on this chart, where this book sold as of last night. So the blue line actually just represents some data that I created from 2020 to 2023 that would still realize that 18%. So it's just an 18% year-over-year growth rate if that was maintained outside of the pandemic. Pandemic data is not helpful when you're looking at comic book prices and price trends because everything was inflated and it was just going bananas. So in the second chart that is just a zoom in of the first chart from 2020 to 2023, we'll see that final selling price of around $5,600. If we followed the 18% year-over-year growth rate, this book at this point should be about a $7,000 book. So what that means is this book on its, is discounted or oversold by pretty close to 20% based off its year-over-year long-term growth rate. So as I said during the Giant Size X-Men video, unless up is down and down is up and we're in wacky world since the pandemic, we are well oversold. Something else that's really interesting being that we're down 20% on this book right now. Over that long stretch that I was collecting data from 2005 to 2019, this book only declined on a year-over-year basis twice. And the worst one was a 21% decline. I believe that was 2015, okay? So basically what that means now is that we are declined currently at 20% below long-term growth rate. And the worst this book ever realized pretty much over the last 15 years or so was 21%. What that tells me is that we're pretty close to a bottom in this book. And let's extend that further. Let's say this book is a really good proxy and indicator for X-Men keys in general. Maybe you could just say silver X-Men keys, but I think you could attribute it to the Bronze Age books as well, and perhaps even the Copper Age books, some that have some rarity to them. I would say we're about the worst we're going to get. Could we decline further? Sure, we could, and then we'd have to recompute data and make some additional conclusions. But being that this book should be based on the long-term growth rate at 7K, and we're only trading it, or it sold at 5,600 at an 8.5, that tells me that we're really close to a bottom. And let me tell you what I'm doing based on this data that I've done. So I've known for a while that X-Men books have really suffered, and anything related to X-Men books have really suffered in value ever since the end of the pandemic. And now Giant Size X-Men is below its long-term value. The other books that aren't X-Men #1 or Giant Size X-Men #1 are suffering sometimes even more. And I might actually put together some aggregate data based on just a grouping of X-Men keys, and we'll just see what it looks like. But so what I am doing as a dealer looking to acquire cheap, valuable books is I'm buying X-Men titles. Also a note on this video, on the subject of this video, I'm not talking my book. I don't own this book. I'm not selling this book. You won't find it on any of my storefronts. I'm currently looking to acquire this book based on this data. Hopefully I'm right. I can't advise you on a financial basis because I don't know your situation, but the evidence looks pretty good that this book has declined 20% below its growth rate, and the worst decline we saw in 15 years was only 21%. So we're pretty close to dropping, we're pretty close to troughing on this particular book. I guess some graders notes on this one. This book does not necessarily hire creases. If you're looking for a raw copy, I would advise perhaps against getting a raw copy because, as I mentioned prior, there could be tampering, there could be restoration, there could be staples replaced. There could be a lot of things done to this book to just boost the value of this book. So I would advise buying it already graded, whether it's, I prefer CGC, but CBCS and PGX or whatever your preferred grading partner is. But remember that this book, being the color on the front, won't hide creases or spine ticks very well. It's a tough book to bump unless the back of the cover is actually white. So if you find a book, you could actually assess how dirty that book is. I've mentioned this before. And you could have a good presser cleaner clean it up. I've got a really great presser cleaner in the Pacific Northwest that's done wonders for my books, and I've boosted the grades on many of these. So in conclusion, Giant Size X-Men #4 is currently 20% undervalued, oversold. My recommendation is that you go out and acquire this book. I wouldn't try to work a dealer very much on this because I think this book is about troughed, but if you find it at a good price, you have my recommendation to go ahead and buy it. So short episode. Let me know what you want to see. Please subscribe to my series. Ask me questions. I'm happy to provide data. I'm also happy to take on a research project if there's a particular title or an age of books or what have you. Whatever you're interested in, let me know. As for the 9.8 video series in Haven Fall Comics, I'm Mr. Pickles. Go forth, love your X-Men titles.